The Dallas Cowboys are back on the field, and what we just saw from their early workouts has me thinking about something nobody wants to talk about yet. Which players are actually going to survive until week 1? Because the roster battles are already heating up and some familiar names might be packing their bags before you know it. Before we break all this down, hit that subscribe button right now, because I'm bringing you Cowboys updates the moment they happen, and with how fast things move in Dallas, you cannot afford to miss a single video, so do yourself a favor and subscribe, because we're growing this blue and silver family, and I need you locked in with us. Now let me tell you what just went down at the Star, and why these next few weeks are absolutely critical for about a dozen guys fighting for their careers in a Cowboys uniform. What you're seeing right now is footage from their voluntary workouts. These aren't the official OTAs yet, those start next week. But the guys who showed up early are already making their case, and that matters more than people realize because coaches are watching everything. You've got DeMarvion Overshown out there moving around, and if you've been following this team, you know how big that is, because this man has dealt with injury after injury, and seeing him finally healthy going into an offseason is legitimately exciting for what this defense can become. Then you've got Jaishawn Barham working right alongside him, and these two flying around together could give defensive coordinator Mike Zimmer some serious options in sub-packages and passing situations where you need speed and instinct all over the field. But here's what nobody is talking about. While some guys are out there looking smooth and confident, others are quietly realizing their grip on a roster spot is slipping, and the competition behind them is hungry and talented, and ready to take what's theirs. Let's talk about the offense for a second, because you see Dak Prescott getting his work in, taking snaps under center, going through his progressions with Brian Schottenheimer watching every single rep and building that chemistry with his new play caller. You also see Joe Milton out there, the backup quarterback who has all the physical tools in the world, but needs to show he can run this offense if called upon. And that's a quiet battle worth monitoring, even if it's not making headlines. Then you've got the skill position players, guys like Jalen Tolbert and Hunter Luepke, and tight end Jake Ferguson, all getting their reps in and looking polished. But here's the crazy part. Behind those established guys, there's a whole crowd of receivers and tight ends who are trying to prove they belong, and not all of them are going to make it. You've got Jonathan Mingo out there wearing number 81, and this is a fascinating case because Dallas actually traded for this dude. He was a second-round pick by Carolina. He's got size and athleticism, but he hasn't put it together yet in the NFL, and now he's in a crowded receiver room fighting for his life. The Cowboys clearly like what Jalen Tolbert brings. CeeDee Lamb is obviously the number 1. Kevontae Turpin is a game breaker in the return game and in space. And then you've got Ryan Flournoy, who flashed last season as a rookie and could be primed for a bigger role. So where does that leave Jonathan Mingo? He's battling guys like MVS, who's been in this offense, Traquan Holden, Tyler Johnson, and a bunch of camp bodies who are all trying to grab maybe 1 or 2 spots at the back end of the roster. I'm not saying Mingo is a lock to get cut, but I am saying he's on the bubble. And if he doesn't show up in OTAs and training camp, he might be the odd man out, and that would be a tough look for a guy they gave up draft capital to acquire. Now let's shift to the tight end position, because this is where things get really interesting, and it involves a second-round pick who might be losing his role sooner than anyone expected. Luke Schoonmaker was drafted in the 2nd round, and he's a fine player. He can block, he can catch a little bit, but has he lived up to that draft investment? Not really. And the main reason is, Jake Ferguson has been so reliable as Dak's safety valve that Schoonmaker hasn't had many opportunities to showcase what he can do. But here's the twist. The Cowboys drafted Michael Trigg in a recent draft, and this kid has legit talent, like 3rd-round value talent, but there were some questions about his character or maturity or whatever you want to call it coming out of college. I don't know the guy personally, so I'm not going to sit here and trash him, but the reports were out there, and that's why he slipped a bit. However, if Michael Trigg can put that behind him and bring the talent he showed at USC to the NFL level, Luke Schoonmaker might find himself as the third tight end who barely sees the field. I'm not saying Schoonmaker gets cut. He'll probably make the roster, but playing time is a different story, and if Trigg starts earning reps in camp, you could see Schoonmaker's role shrink real fast. That's something to keep an eye on because tight end is supposed to be a strength for this offense, and you want competition pushing everyone to be better, but it also means somebody is going to be disappointed when the snaps get divided up. And here's where it gets even more intense. On the defensive side of the ball, specifically on the edge, there are guys who were drafted in the second and third rounds who might not even make the 53-man roster, and that sounds insane, but let me explain why it's a real possibility. Sam Williams is the name that stands out the most. He was a second-round pick back in 2022, and he's shown flashes, but he's never put it all together consistently, and now the depth chart has passed him by. You've got Micah Parsons, who is obviously a superstar. You brought in Rashawn Gary, who was a former first-round pick and is expected to be a starter opposite Micah. And then you've got other guys who can rotate in and provide pass rush. When you look at how the roster is constructed, you might only have room for 4 or 5 edge rushers. And if Sam Williams is number 6, he's going to be fighting for his career. The same thing applies to some of the younger guys who were drafted more recently. They're all battling for limited spots. And the reality is not everyone survives. Now here's the thing that might save some of these guys. Championship-level teams over the last few years have rotated a ton of edge rushers to keep everyone fresh and create mismatches against offensive tackles who don't get to sub in and out. If you can roll 5 or even 6 guys off the edge and keep them all fresh, that's a nightmare for opposing offenses because tackles get worn down and your pass rushers stay explosive into the fourth quarter. So maybe Dallas keeps an extra edge rusher or two, but if they don't, Sam Williams and some of these other bubble guys are going to be looking for work, and that's a harsh reality of this business. Let me tell you why all of this matters beyond just the individual players. Because roster construction affects everything from your salary cap to your game plan to the vibe in the locker room. If you cut a guy like Jonathan Mingo, who you just traded for, that's an admission that the trade didn't work, and you're eating dead money for nothing, and front offices hate that. But sometimes you have to cut your losses. If a second-round pick like Luke Schoonmaker or Sam Williams doesn't pan out, that's a reflection on your scouting and your development program, and it raises questions about whether you're maximizing your draft capital. And from a locker room perspective, when veteran guys or recent picks start getting pushed out by younger, hungrier players, it sends a message that nobody's job is safe and you have to earn your spot every single day, which can be motivating but also creates tension if it's not managed right. The coaching staff has to balance all of this. They have to evaluate talent honestly, they have to think about scheme fit and special teams and depth at every position, and they have to make tough calls that affect people's lives and careers. It's not easy and it's not always fair, but that's the NFL, and that's why these next few months are so critical for everyone involved. Now let's talk about some of the positive stuff. Because it's not all doom and gloom, there are guys who are rising and making plays and getting everyone excited about what this team can be. DeMarvion Overshown being healthy is legitimately huge, because this dude can run sideline to sideline, he's got coverage ability, he's got instincts, and if he stays on the field, he could be a difference maker for a defense that needs playmakers at every level. Seeing him work with Jaishawn Barham in these early sessions shows that the linebacker core is going to have some juice and some versatility, and that's exactly what Mike Zimmer wants in his system. Then you've got Caleb Downs, who we saw at the rookie premiere, looking every bit like a future star at safety. This kid lives and breathes football, and you can tell he's going to bring it every single day. Whether you play him as a nickel safety or a box safety or a deep free safety, he's got the instincts and the work ethic to excel. And on offense, you've got guys like Jalen Tolbert, who continues to build on his breakout last season. You've got Ryan Flournoy, who looked really promising as a rookie and could take another step. And you've got the connection between Dak and his weapons getting sharper every rep. The offensive line is returning basically everybody, The running back room added some pieces, and with a new offensive coordinator in Brian Schottenheimer, there's a real chance this offense looks different and more dynamic than it has in years. So yes, there are roster battles and tough cuts coming, but there's also a ton of talent on this team and reasons to be optimistic if things break the right way. But here's what I keep coming back to. The Cowboys are in this weird spot where the expectations are always championship or bust, but the roster has question marks all over the place, and the margin for error is razor thin. You cannot afford to whiff on second and third round picks. You cannot afford to make trades that don't work out. You cannot afford to have key guys injured or underperforming when the playoffs roll around. Every decision matters, every roster spot matters, every rep in OTAs and training camp matters, because the difference between making the playoffs and missing them, or winning in January versus going home early, often comes down to depth and execution and having the right guys in the right roles. So when I see Jonathan Mingo fighting for a roster spot, or Luke Schoonmaker potentially losing playing time, or Sam Williams on the edge of getting cut, I think about what that means for the bigger picture. Are we maximizing our talent? Are we developing guys the right way? Are we making smart decisions that set us up for sustained success? Or are we just spinning our wheels and hoping things work out? These are the questions that every Cowboys fan should be asking, because hope is not a strategy, and at some point this team has to turn talent and potential into actual wins that matter. One more thing before we wrap this up. The fact that these guys are out there working in voluntary sessions before OTAs even officially start tells you something about the culture and the urgency in that building. Nobody is coasting. Nobody is taking their spot for granted. Everyone knows that this is a prove-it year for a lot of people, from the front office to the coaching staff to the players on the field. Mike McCarthy is coaching for his job. Dak Prescott is playing on a massive contract and needs to deliver in the playoffs. Micah Parsons is trying to prove he's worth a record-breaking deal. And guys all up and down the roster are trying to show they belong. That kind of pressure can either crush a team or galvanize them into playing their best football, and we're about to find out which way it goes for Dallas. The next few weeks of OTAs will give us our first real look at how this team is coming together, who's stepping up, who's falling behind, and what the identity of this squad is going to be. Then training camp will separate the pretenders from the contenders, and by the time we get to week 1, we'll know exactly what we have. But right now, in early May, all we can do is watch the film, read the reports, and try to project what's coming. And I'm telling you, there are going to be some surprises, both good and bad, before this is all said and done. So here's my final take on all of this. The Cowboys have talent, they have potential, they have playmakers, but they also have questions and uncertainties, and guys who need to step up or step aside. Jonathan Mingo needs to prove he was worth the trade. Luke Schoonmaker needs to carve out a role before Michael Trigg takes it from him. Sam Williams needs to show he belongs on this roster before the numbers game pushes him out. And a bunch of other guys we didn't even talk about are in the same boat fighting for their careers. The good news is guys like DeMarvion Overshown and Caleb Downs and Jalen Tolbert are trending up and giving us reasons to be excited. The bad news is this team has been talented on paper before, and it hasn't translated to January success. So until we see it on the field when it matters, all of this is just speculation and hope. But that's what makes this time of year so fun. We get to dream about what this team can be. We get to debate roster spots and depth charts. We get to imagine scenarios where everything clicks and we make a run. And yeah, some of those dreams are going to get crushed when reality sets in. But until then, we ride with our guys and we believe in the star. And we hope that this is finally the year it all comes together. Before you go, make sure you hit that subscribe button one more time if you haven't already, because we're building something special here at Blue and Silver Nation, and I want you to be part of it from the start. We're covering every single Cowboys update, every rumor, every move, every game, and we're doing it with the passion and insight that real fans deserve. Now drop a comment below and tell me which 3 players you think are going to lose their roster spot this summer. Do you agree with my picks, or do you think I'm way off? And what moves do you want to see Dallas make before the season starts? Let's get a conversation going because Cowboys fans are the most passionate in the league, and I want to hear what you're thinking. This is Blue and Silver Nation. We're all in on America's team, and I'll catch you on the next one.